Hello again, my lovelies, and welcome back to Avatar: The Legend of Percy, Trial by Fire. I have been sick the last week, so I apologize for any time my voice might sound a little bit croaky or otherwise weird, but I couldn't wait to record again because this fanfiction is so great. And without further ado, we shall go into Chapter 7 of Avatar: The Legend of Percy, Trial by Fire, written by Wardof Winters. Check out their original fic, as well as their Discord and Tumblr in the description below. Of Chapter 7, The Ocean. Percy found the event fun. He stuck close to Triton, though not too close so he didn't look like he was clinging to him or afraid, but close enough that Triton could keep an eye on him and help out if he needed. Everyone was very polite, clearly prepared for the meeting. The number of times someone got insulted politely was impressive. He didn't know there were that many ways to use the exclusionary us but not you grammar in Halmaheran. He managed to keep himself together through it all, though, and did his best to fit in. He wasn't as good as them at insulting people politely, but he was good at being extra nice, or so Triton said, so he stuck with that. He was pretty sure one of them was trying to figure out what the insult in his words was, but Percy just gave him a bright smile. None of the insults were mean, though. Well, most of them weren't. A few people were a bit stuck up, but for the most part, they were just teasing. Several seemed to already know each other. He'd get better at interacting with them all. Halmaheran was still not quite natural to him, but Triton had given him many a lecture in hiding weakness, not letting your emotions give you away, and keeping a calm under stress. So he did okay. He liked to think so, at least. Until one was strong enough in the ocean to not care about the consequences of what they said and did, they needed to be able to wear a mask. One day, Percy would be strong enough to be himself without fear. The food at the event was definitely a highlight. Very tasty, especially the tuna. Raw fish was expensive to buy in a safe way at home, so he hadn't had it before. He decided that was a crime. It was amazing. There were all kinds of fish too, not just tuna. He thought it might be like sushi, being wrapped in other things, and there were stuff mixed in it. Some of it was sliced into chunks and mixed with seaweed and seeds of other stuff. And some was wrapped up tight. He'd have to ask Triton what they were called later. Triton showed him how to eat everything, including some fun seaweed dish. It was coated in some kind of oil, mixed with something spicy. Percy liked it. There were also drinks in taipanu. He'd never seen one before, but they were sponge cups that rejected salt water, but could hold onto other liquids. Triton said it was something to do with their biology. Percy didn't really know how that worked, though. Soon after, Percy got a show with his meal, when some mare insulted his ability to use the utensils. Kinda like chopsticks, but with sharp bottoms. And Triton took insult to that. Triton politely informed him that the way he was holding his taipu was equally suspect. The tea is supposed to be in the taipanu, not in the water around it. But then very politely excluded him from the rest of the conversation. Percy rather thought the Mer had just committed political suicide with his insult to Percy. Whoops, but Halmaheran was a lot of fun. Lots of ways to insult people. Interacting with other mares was a fun experience. He'd never gotten to speak to any but Triton before, so it was cool It was cool to experience the little quirks of Halmaheran in actual conversation. Yeah, he talked to Triton, but Triton had only recently started mixing in more of the complex grammar and little language tricks that the others used casually. The mares were really nice to talk to. Even when being insulting, they were cool. He really liked one named Massina. Their tail was nearly as flowy as his own. He had been confused at first why people were using poi for them, but Triton told him they were a mernix, not a merman or a mermaid. Percy had nearly forgotten merfolk had 3 main sexes, not 2. Poi didn't really have an English equivalent according to Triton, but it was generally considered the mernix pronoun. Triton said it would probably be the equivalent of they-them, if he had to choose. None of the pronouns really fit English, cause merfolk had a widely different gender system, but poi poi no was the closest to gender neutral in their language. Poi was the pronoun most commonly used for referring to groups too, like how English used them and all. Percy was fascinated by it all. He knew that toi and voi were the closest to he, him, and she, her in Halmaheran, but he'd not thought about other pronouns. Percy didn't realize there were so many gender options either, but Triton assured him it was a thing with humans as well as merfolk. Though he didn't know how humans treated it. He hadn't been around them much lately. But yeah, Massina was nice. Their tail was colorful with pinks and yellows and blues, all blended together. And when they showed off their magic, Percy was in awe. They twisted a tiny current of water around them, sweeping up little fishies in a circle around them that sparkled like fairy lights. Percy wanted to learn to do that. He'd tried the currents once, but it hadn't worked out. Everyone had equally cool magic when they started showing off. Songs filled the air, water danced hot and cold, spinning in intricate patterns, light crackled and coral formed new shapes. It was a delight to watch, and Percy was having a lot of fun until one asked him about his. He shot a hesitant look at Triton, fingering his bracelet. Triton just nodded. He supposed it was fine then, so he could just... What should he do? Maybe... He raised his hands, the water dancing around him, and reached out. He called to the sea as he twisted his hands, spreading them. The temperature dropped with a careful thought until he had a block of ice between his hands. He carefully whispered to the sea, silently yet clear, and guided the ice to shift how he wanted with a slice of his hand. Cracks and twists filled the ice, melting away with another thought as the water temperature rose and fell in waves. He sent careful lines of hot water curling the shape, carving into it until a form was left visible for all to see. And with a last twist of his fingers, the ice fish was complete. He focused once more, biting his lips as he aimed to recreate a trick he'd played a dozen times before in his water cups, though on a much smaller scale. Those were hard to guide, but he could do it. Water twined around the fish with a flick of his fingers, and with a grin of his face, Percy guided to shift his tail. It flicked, moving smoothly through the water as he split his attention to guide the water, to move the tail and to keep it in its form, and to melt and refreeze the necessary parts to let it move smoothly. Bit by bit the fish moved, speeding up as he got better control of it. And then he guided the fins to rise and fall as well, speeding it through the water with careful movements. He willed the water to guide it in careful moves, the sea whispering to him, water twinning around his fins alongside the ice fish's fins. The other mers murmured to each other as he guided it to swing circles around him. That's a difficult bit of magic there, said a mer, swimming closer to examine his fish. It was a mermaid a few years older than him, he thought. Her hair was long and blue and pinned up with a delicate seaweed and pearl hairpiece. Her dark green tail was sleeker than Triton's, which Percy has found usually meant a fast swimmer. She flashed her bright smile, keeping most of his senses on the fish as he guided it to circle her. I suppose so, he said mildly. I do it for fun when I'm bored in class. You do that for fun during lessons? One more asked in shock. That's hard to do with all your attention on it, surely. Percy wasn't exactly paying attention in class, but he nodded anyways. Triton was smirking behind them. That's very impressive, one said, reaching out to touch the fish. Percy guided it to flick away, a bit rougher than he would have liked, but it looked mostly natural. His fingers ached with cold from the coiling threads he was using to guide around it. You must have a skilled Eatuvi Imote Aurorai to have such skill already. Percy kept a straight face while he mulled over the term. Eatuvi Imote. Imote sounded like Imoteora, which was mage, and Aurorai was teacher. He knew that. Eatuvi was a new word, though. He didn't know what that one meant, and he'd have to fake it. My teacher's name is Katara. She's very skilled in water and ice. Amur leaned over as Percy twinned the fish close to him before flicking his fingers in a motion of goodbye and willing the ice to melt away. The water was cool as it swept over him, gentle and soothing. I've not heard of her, said Masina. She likes her privacy, but she's fairly well known where I come from. He wasn't lying about that either. Loads knew her back home. They nodded. What part? Katara is of the North Sea, far north. Triton interrupted. Well known in that part of the ocean, but not much elsewhere. Very skilled, but I've heard your teacher is a rather skillful Uatevi Imote. Tomata, how is she doing? The subject shifted neatly to everyone bragging about their teachers. When things started to wind down, Percy thanked Triton softly for the aid. He wasn't sure what he would have said to the questions there. Triton smiled and assured him it was nothing before ushering him ahead to lead him back to the rivers so Percy could return home. The event had started late by sea hours. Third tide, but it was even later on land. 4 a.m.-ish. The sea didn't go by the solar calendar, but by the tides. 4 tides a day split into 5 parts each. It meant that calendar didn't really line up with land, though strangely the end of the year was almost the same time. Percy was glad for that. But because of that, it was nearly morning by the time they reached land, and Percy was tired. Despite that, he didn't really want to go home. He liked being in the ocean. He liked being able to use his magic freely, and he liked talking with others about magic. He liked spending time with Triton. He just liked being in the sea. But he was only half of the sea. The other half was of land, and land was his home as well, the home he was raised on. Plus, he wanted to stay with his mom. So, back to the apartment he went. The rest of summer passed far too quickly for Percy. It was a blur of books, cleaning the river and going to events, a scatter of time with his mom, cooking and talking and just spending time together highlighted the rest. He made friends with several mares, Masina a good friend and a friend of theirs joining their group. Rosa was Xer's name, and Xe used Xer pronouns. Said she liked the sound of it since Moi didn't really have an English equivalent. Xe also used voy, which was basically she-her. Percy found the various pronouns very cool. He didn't get to see Rosa as often as Massina, though. Xe had to help their parents with work a lot. But he did get to meet the other men. Fetu and Lagi were really cool, and Fetu had the prettiest tail Percy had ever seen. It was a brilliant yellow, almost gold, and dashes of orange shimmering in it. Percy thought it looked a bit like the sun, with the twining, flowy bits reminding him of sun rays, the soft yellow that shone in the dark. Lagi's was very similar to his brother's, just a bit softer in shade. Lagi was a healer in training, and that reminded Percy he meant to learn more about healing. He made a note of it. And he met Samoa. She was super sweet and amazing at purification. It was a lot of fun to hang out with her and trade notes on their skills. He met a few other mares too. Some he was closer to than others, and it was a lot of fun to meet so many and learn so much. Other than the events, there was also the solstice. It was a brief respite, one he spent with Triton alone as usual. He gave Triton an icebox he made himself. Hopefully it's with working Ivuisa that would prevent it from working. Otherwise, it was fairly simple. A square box of ice with a basic knot pattern, the intent called a Celtic knot, decorating the edges, and a trident impressed on each side. The lid had a bit of extra flair with bubbles scattered on it. Triton seemed to think it was well made and congratulated Percy on his stasis Ivuisa. Percy had also put 2 cent dollars in the box for extra treasure. And these were better than his previous ones. They didn't draw on power properly, but they should hold it. He hoped they worked right, and Triton seemed impressed too. Of course, Triton got him a great gift as well. It was a hairpiece, made of twisted colors and small shining pearls. Percy loved it, and it kept his hair out of his face and looked super pretty. He probably needed a haircut, but if he got one, the hairpin wouldn't fit in his hair right, so he'd keep it long. Maybe he could dye it. Percy's birthday was the only other event of note in the summer, and as usual, he spent it with Triton and his mom. He was turning 11 now, and was almost a teenager. That was a big deal. Triton had already given him his present, the merfolk change stone. He wasn't sure what to call it yet. Despite that, Triton had another gift for him. Percy studied the bag that Triton gave him. It was very simple, made of leather, but the leather seemed different from anything he'd seen before. It was less sleek. It has a texture that reminded him of scales, but they were too big for that. And it was shaped strange. Wait. He knew that shape. It was like what Katara had. It was a water skin. Triton grinned when Percy started wriggling in excitement and explained it was one connected to the ocean, so Percy wouldn't even have to keep it filled. That was so cool. The bag was limited in how much it could be pulled out at once. The opening was small to contain the force of the ocean within it, but Percy thought that it was very cool anyways. Even more like Katara now. School was starting again, and Percy wasn't very happy about it. Summer had been lovely, but he was once again stuck with school and rude teachers, and judgy students, and the very suspicious guinea pig his class had. It was itchy. Was he allergic? Or was it the same itch as the other beings? He just hoped it didn't try to kill him. But It was really bugging him. Percy told Triton about the itchiness, and Triton seemed to know what it was. He seemed pleased too. He explained that Percy was likely sensing magic, and that the guinea pig was probably not a natural guinea pig, but one transformed. Then Percy got a very fun lecture on purification magic. It wasn't just cleaning the water, but also could be used for sensing things. They could sense impurities, but like things that were different from the world around them. It was complicated, but Triton said it would generally register anything not quite right, good or bad. Triton said Percy would probably be able to sense his presence eventually too. The best purifiers could sense even the subtlest of magics, and the experts could use that knowledge to remove the worst of curses. Though even a beginning could do some interesting stuff with the curses. He said Percy was a bit young for the sensing to start, but it probably wouldn't be too much. In the meantime, he supplied Percy with books on it. Percy vaguely recalled a mention in one of his earlier books, but he hadn't really understood it at the time. It was really cool, though, and probably helpful. He made a note to read the new books soon. Okay, so Percy did not know how to break curses. He didn't at all, so he definitely wouldn't try anything with the guinea pig. Definitely not. On another note, he was doing well in class. Math wasn't horrible, English was still horrible, and land geography was the worst. Why couldn't they focus on sea geography? He was doing great there. Percy once again baked food for the fall equinox. Lots of cakes and cookies and falafels. All blue, of course. Triton and him shared an underwater picnic. Percy didn't like his English teacher at all. The feeling was definitely mutual, of course, but the teacher was he was out to get Percy. Percy worked really hard on his English homework and rushed to get to class extra early. But the teacher kept marking him as late and took points off of his homeworks for the dumbest stuff. He didn't like the food Percy brought to school at times either and got mad when Percy was practicing his Halmaheram during break. He swore the teacher gave him a detention for breathing the other day, and another one for his shirt being untucked. He complained to Triton, but Triton couldn't do much. He did suggest that Percy tried to use his undersea lessons to outdo the stupid teacher. Percy was sure Triton just wanted an excuse to make him practice etiquette more. When the next solstice arrived, Percy gave Triton a stone horse. It wasn't one he made. He wasn't that good with stone. He found it while cleaning the river and then used his powers to add some ivuisa for protection and safety to it. He thought he was getting pretty good at them. He made a note to learn more. Triton gifted him clothes. Normally he thought gifts of clothes were a bit boring. They were a staple at home because clothes were expensive and Mom needed to save money. So he was used to that, though he did like the soft socks Mom got him. Point being, clothes were normal, very land-like, and they were Mom's things to get him. But Triton's clothes weren't anything like the ones his mom got him. They were from the sea, and nothing from the sea was boring. The ocean didn't really wear clothes, which was something that confused Percy at first. Merfolk didn't have breasts like land women either, no matter the sex. So they didn't cover their chests either. Most wore jewelry. Jewelry was big in the sea. Warriors wore armor. Only on occasion would you see clothes-like covers. They just weren't normal. But when they went to land, they wore clothes. But they weren't exactly the same clothes humans used. In Percy's expert opinion, they looked way better. There were flowy parts that were super comfortable, kinda like Mom's nice flowy leggings. They reminded Percy of his tails, but like pants, also made out of silk. Then there were shirts with simple but nice designs, coral impressions, blocky decorations, intricate bubble designs, and waves. The shirts were super soft and had several folds. They kinda reminded Percy of the outfits ancient Greeks had in the statues in museums. But shirts! They had several cloths made of mother of pearl and shiny to hold them in place. He liked it. It gave something to fiddle with. Both of them seemed to shimmer with scales, which Triton said was to strengthen them. He didn't know what they were made out of, but it was super cool. They were in several colors, and Percy thought they were all fun. It was probably crazy expensive, at least on land, if not in the sea. They were definitely the nicest clothes he owned, probably the nicest thing he owned, period. Percy would treasure them forever. The rest of the school year seemed to drag on, but at least he was doing good in class, except for English. He didn't understand that teacher's problem with him. He wasn't the only student having issues, but he definitely seemed to have the most trouble. He tried being nice. He tried working harder than everyone else. He tried using all the manners. He tried just disappearing into the background, but nothing he did seemed to work. He was so confused. He was used to teachers not liking him. He was the trouble kid, but this was beyond the usual. His mom seemed upset when he mentioned it and told him there was nothing he could do about it. She promised to make sure he had a different teacher the next year, though. The spring equinox was coming soon, and Percy had decided to do something a bit harder than usual. In science class, he learned about how frost kept plants alive in the cold, so he wanted to try to frost over a sunflower for Triton. Triton had been interested in all the flowers he'd brought before. Apparently he didn't leave the ocean often unless for work, so he didn't see many land flowers. Persephone sometimes grew some near the beaches, so he'd seen a lot of flowers, but not often. Percy was gonna give him a sunflower to keep with him. Then Triton could see the sunflower whenever. It took a while, like forever. But he got a lot of practice with his ice control. Eventually, he managed to get good enough at manipulating the frost that he sealed the flower neatly. Maybe one day he'd be good enough to do it fast. He was very proud of his sunflower preserved in a ball of ice. Please ignore the pile of failures off to the side. Percy preened as Triton praised him for the frosted sunflower. He said he was very happy to add this sunflower to his room, and it was very, very impressive that Percy could make frost like that. He also made a comment wondering if Percy had some winter or ice or snow deity in his lineage, but Percy just shrugged. He knew his granddad was white and his grandma was biracial with her dad from Egypt and her mom native. But he didn't know too much about his family. His grandparents died when his mom was young, and his great uncle who raised his mom didn't know too much about her mom. He was from her dad's side. They had his grandma's cookbook, though, and he and his mom liked making things from it. Triton had hummed and moved on to giving him his present. It was a small orb, and Percy held it up in confusion for a moment. But then Triton tapped it and it lit up. The world was filled with stars, his skin shining like he was made of them, and Triton's face dotted with little glowing dots. He waved his hand, staring in delight at the light dancing over him. I thought you might like to see the stars as we do in the sea. Triton murmured softly. Percy nodded, holding the star orb close to him and staring at the little lights covering him. It was beautiful. And it'll let you learn the constellations. Percy couldn't help but laugh. Leave it to Triton to make a gift educational. He loved it. The stars were beautiful, and he wished he could stare at it forever. Triton showed him how to contain the stars to the orb, making it like a snow globe, but made of stars. He shook it, fascinated by the movements of the stars. Triton had outdone him again. Percy had successfully gotten himself expelled again. Yes, he will accept congratulatory gift mailed to his address promptly, thank you. The English teacher had finally gotten his wish and Percy was kicked out. He'd been calling Percy a problem all year long, so the school had more than heard about the issues Percy caused in class. There were plenty of prior examples of Percy's misdeeds, so when the guinea pig went missing and Percy was the last one seen by it, well, the school declared they would not be welcoming the troublemaker back. Honestly, Percy was most annoyed that for once he was right about it. The guinea pig was missing and it was Percy's fault. He'd tried to turn the guinea pig back into a human, now was stuck with a pet goldfish. He had no idea how that worked, but at least he could understand it now. First thing it said was, "Never go to a spa, ever." He had no idea what that was supposed to mean, but he really needed to learn more about purification and curse breaking. He didn't know how he changed the guinea pig into a goldfish, and that seemed important to learn. He made a note of it. Mysteriously, the school flooded. Percy was baffled. It didn't have a plumbing problem. Triton was in a good mood during the lesson today. And summer was in full swing, and honestly, it was fun. Triton was taking him to events more often, and Percy was getting to spend time with those friends he started making. Solstice came and went once more, and as usual, Percy and Triton traded their gifts. Triton had given him more clothes in a different style. These were from a different area of the sea. He'd had to go there for a diplomatic meeting and thus brought some for Percy while there. It was nice. They were nice clothes, and Percy felt happy that Triton thought of him while he was gone. It was like how his mom got him little trinkets that reminded her of him. The variety was nice, with loops instead of clasps. The sleeves and body were flowy, making him feel like he had wings as he spun around. The pants were soft, loose all the way down, unlike the ones from before, which were flowy at the bottoms. They made him think of those loose, relaxing pants he saw people wear in one of Mom's shows. Triton had declared that Percy knew enough theory of the siren song to begin preparing to learn it properly, and thus Percy was gifted an ocarina. It was a type of musical instrument used in the sea. Apparently it sounded best in the sea with the water to change the sound, but it also sounded nice on land. This one was shaped like a seashell and colored a pretty blue. It had 6 holes for him to use to make different sounds. Triton also got him some books to learn from. Percy wanted to actually start using the siren song, but Triton was quick to shoot that down. It can be dangerous to practice when you're young, and your lungs are still growing, so most start a formal education at 12 Veru. Even then, they don't usually start using the song until 14 Veru at the earliest. But Fetu uses it. Fetu has a rare gift, Triton explained. His lungs are naturally capable of handling the strain the siren song puts on them. Yours are not like that, but you can begin learning how to play an instrument, which will help you with the song when you begin using it. Percy was only a little disappointed that he couldn't use the song now. He was mostly excited he was going to get to learn it at all. He would master it. As usual, Percy felt his gift was inadequate in the face of Triton's gift. But it was all he had to give, so he gave it to all the same. It was a geode snow globe he'd made himself. As most of his gifts, he found the pods in the river. The geode itself came from the river, and it was the same shade of green as Triton's tail. Percy had thought of him immediately when he saw it. Plus, it was super sparkly, and Triton liked sparkly things. He was also super vain about his tail and taught Percy a lot about tail care too. So Percy worked really hard to make the snow globe, and was very thankful for the YouTube videos. Triton looked delighted as Percy showed it him, ruffling Percy's hair and thanking him. Percy was glad he could make Triton happy. Percy decided to dye his hair. It probably would have been smarter to tell his mom first, but he'd been feeling alone at the events. Everyone had colorful hair. Everyone except him. On land, colorful hair was weird. He'd heard some people make comments about people with colorful hair. But in the sea, bright colors were the norm. Even if someone was born with black hair, they tended to dye it because bright colors were a sign of power. The most dangerous things in the oceans were brightly colored. It was a warning and a promise. So most wanted bright colored hair, especially for their young. It helped keep them safe, and people tended to have fun with it. Percy felt rather self-conscious of his black hair. On land, he was normal, if a troublemaker. He didn't stand out at all in his neighborhood, though his hair wasn't like his mom's. She said he got his grandpa's hair more than hers. But in the sea, having black hair was weird. Even Triton's hair wasn't really black, though it could look that. It was actually a dark blue. So he asked Samoa for help. She had a really pretty white tail with matching white hair, but her natural hair was a dark brown, so she supplied him with the same hair dye she used, but in blue. He liked blue, and it matched Triton. She'd never done the hair blue before, and he only wanted it a little blue, dark like Triton's. They thought it would be easy. She'd dyed her hair a few times. It didn't go as planned. On the bright side, his hair was now blue, cobalt blue, which was very clearly blue, a deep bright blue. Triton thought it was hilarious. The failure to dye it right at least. Though he'd also sat Percy down and told him he looked perfect, just the way he was, and there was no need to change himself to fit in, though he looked lovely with blue hair too. Percy was glad that Triton liked it. He did feel comforted by Triton saying he was fine the way he was, dark hair and all. His mom was not as amused as Triton. He was grounded for a week, and she tried to remove the dye from his hair. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you see it, the dye was a permanent dye, meant to stay in the hair for a long time, even with the harshness of the ocean. The dye remover didn't do anything. Triton found that even funnier. He decided he liked the blue, despite the issues in getting it. Percy's 12th birthday came quicker than Percy expected. The summer nearly over, things happened so fast. Triton got him another present, one just for school. It was a super cool backpack. It was made of a similar leather as Percy's water skin with the fabric over the outside. It was a lovely deep blue with shiny clasps, shaped like shells. He wasn't sure what the metal was, but it gleamed in the light. There were faint green designs decorating it. And the best part was, it was enchanted. Only Percy would be able to take things out of it, though others could put things in, and it kept the inside from being damaged by anything on the outside. It could even be set on fire and be just fine. Triton even demonstrated it. Percy thought it was amazing and was super excited for school so he could use it. Percy was so happy to have a friend like Triton. Percy was no longer excited for school. His mom had put him in another private school, which wasn't bad because he'd been to those before, but this time it was a boarding school, which meant he would be staying at the school. The school which was not near the river, the school which required him to stay on campus, the school where he wouldn't be able to visit Triton or see his friends, or gossip with fish, or practice his waterbending. Tevemoa Triton had taken to correct him. It meant thermomancy, apparently. He was stuck on land and in that school, and he wasn't happy at all. Triton reminded him that they'd still be able to talk via the iris messaging, but that wasn't the same. Percy wouldn't see Triton in person for months, and he'd not spent so long away from Triton since they met. Even when he vanished for a while, it was at most 2 months. Percy didn't want to leave his only friend, but he had to. So he said goodbye to his fish friends and Eli the eel. He went with Triton to say goodbye to his friends in the sea and explaining his lessons had been moved to another area for a while, so he wouldn't be able to visit for a few months. He was glad they understood, but he was worried they'd forget about him while he was gone. He hoped he got expelled from this one quickly. He really wasn't looking forward to it. Percy stared up at the gate miserably. He fingered his bracelet, the stones glittering on it, then twisted the bag strap and took a deep breath. He may have been away from his friends and Triton, but he could handle this. It was just 1 year, then he'd be back home. He was Percy Jackson, son of Okeanos, and Triton's friend. He was a waterbender, and he was going to be a master purifier one day. He could handle 1 year at the stupid boarding school. He took one more deep breath, then stepped through the gates of Yancey Academy to begin the next school year. Okay, so next chapter starts with canon events, most likely. Before we end this chapter, as always, the Halmaharan and the other terminologies. For Halmaharan, we have Taipanu, the sponge cups, Poi for the pronoun they, Poino, which is they them, Toi for he, Voi for she, and Moi for xe. Ea Tuvi Imote Ororai is the thermomancy mage teacher. Uatevi Imote is the storm mage. Ivuisa for the sea runes, and Veruo for the storm seasons. And the terminology is for Xixter, which is a type of neopronoun. Fish letter is a type of letter, though in this case it would be sea serpent letter. How fancy! The falafel are a common breakfast food in Egypt, though Percy gets them as a daily treat. And the patterns on the clothes Percy got are based on our knowledge of ancient Greek clothing. Thank you everyone for listening. If you get to this far, why don't you consider liking and subscribing, and go to Wardof Winters Tumblr and Discord. They always welcome new people. Thank you very much, and see you until next time, my lovelies. And please, before we go, take care of yourselves. I know you're dehydrated, even with the talk of so much water. Please, get something to drink. You will look like raisins if you don't, and you'll get a headache. You don't want a headache, don't you? Anyways, bye-bye, my lovelies.